The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling glass of Sterling and Associates, illuminating the dust motes dancing over my drafting table. I arrived early, as I always did, seeking the quiet solace of the office before the chaos of construction calls began. The blueprints for the new city museum were spread out before me, a labyrinth of white lines on blue paper that usually calmed my mind. But today my focus was fractured. My office door clicked open. Eric walked in, a rare sight at 7 a.m. He held a sleek, expensive glass bottle filled with a thick, glossy purple liquid. He was wearing that charming, crooked smile that had won me over 5 years ago. A smile I hadn't seen in months. "Happy anniversary, Maya," he said softly, setting the bottle on my desk. "I know I've been distant lately. Work has been brutal. But I want to fix us. I made this for you. Acai blueberries flax, packed with superfoods for your stress." I stared at the bottle, guilt-warred with nausea. I hadn't told him yet. I was 12 weeks pregnant, and for the last month, my sense of smell had been a treacherous enemy. The mere thought of the thick, textured smoothie made my stomach churn violently. But Eric looked so hopeful, so desperate to bridge the gap that had grown between us. "Thank you, Eric," I managed, forcing a smile. "I'll drink it in a bit. I just need to finish this section." He lingered, watching me with an intensity that felt less like affection and more like scrutiny. "Drink it while it's cold, okay? Promise me." He kissed my forehead and left. As soon as the door closed, I slumped. I couldn't do it. Just then a soft knock interrupted me. Mrs. Chun, our elderly janitor, poked her head in with her trash cart. She looked exhausted, her face pale. "Good morning, Miss Sterling," she whispered. "Mrs. Chun, are you all right?" "Just a little dizzy. Rushed out without breakfast," she admitted. I looked at the purple bottle. "Here," I said, offering it to her. "Please take this. My partner made it, it's full of fruit. I can't stomach it right now." Her eyes lit up. "Oh, you are too kind, Miss Sterling." She took it gratefully, sipping it as she hummed a tune and walked back into the hallway. An hour later, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the glass corridors of the firm. I dropped my pen and ran toward the sound, freezing when I saw the scene that would shatter my reality and change everything I thought I knew about the man I loved. The hallway was chaos. Architects and interns stood pressed against the glass walls, hands over their mouths. In the center of the corridor, Mrs. Chun lay writhing on the polished concrete floor. It was a nightmare. Foam bubbled at the corners of her mouth, and her hands clutched her abdomen with white-knuckled force. But it was the dark crimson stain spreading across the gray fabric of her uniform that made the air leave my lungs. "Call 911. I screamed, dropping to my knees beside her. Her skin was clammy, her eyes rolling back in her head. "Mrs. Chun, stay with me." The glass doors of the main conference room burst open. Eric rushed out, feigning the concern of a bystander, but when his eyes landed on the floor, he stopped dead. He didn't look concerned. He looked horrified. But not the horror of a tragedy, the horror of a mistake. His eyes darted frantically from Mrs. Chun to me. Disbelief washed over his face, followed instantly by a flash of pure, unadulterated rage. He crossed the distance between us in 3 strides and grabbed my upper arm, his grip bruising. "What did you do?" he hissed, his voice trembling. "Why is she on the floor?" I stared at him, confused by the ferocity in his tone. "She collapsed, Eric. Help me." "You gave it to her," he muttered, almost to himself, his face draining of color. "You didn't drink it." Paramedics arrived in a whirlwind of noise and static, pushing us back. As they worked on Mrs. Chun, loading her onto a stretcher, I watched Eric retreat to the far corner of the hallway. He wasn't looking at the woman fighting for her life. He was fumbling with his phone, his fingers shaking so hard he almost dropped it. As the ambulance sirens wailed below, I watched Eric whispering urgently into his phone. He wasn't calling the hospital. He was calling someone else. And by the way he shielded his mouth and cast furtive glances at me, I knew whoever was on the other end was the person he trusted more than me. The hospital waiting room was sterile and cold, smelling of antiseptic and stale coffee. A doctor approached us looking grave. "Family of Mrs. Chun?" A young woman in a sharp blazer stood up from the corner. It was Sarah Chun, Mrs. Chin's daughter. I knew she was a detective with the precinct, But today she looked only like a terrified daughter. I'm her daughter. Tell me. She's stabilized, but it was close, the doctor said, glancing at her clipboard. Toxicology found massive amounts of pennyroyal and tansy in her system. These are highly toxic herbs traditionally used to induce. Well, in this dosage they act as a violent poison. 2 uniformed officers stepped forward. Eric immediately stepped in front of me, putting on his protective partner mask. Officer, I made a smoothie this morning. I bought ingredients from a specialty organic shop downtown. Maybe the batch was contaminated. He turned to me, his eyes pleading but hard. Or, Maya has been so paranoid lately. Stressed about work. Maybe she added something? She's been acting so strange. My jaw dropped. What? Eric, are you insane? Detective Chun stepped between us. The grief in her face was replaced by a cold, predatory professionalism. She ignored Eric's accusation and looked straight at me. My mother mentioned you gave her the drink, Miss Sterling. I did, I stammered. I felt sick. I just wanted to be nice. Sarah Chun leaned in close, her voice a low weapon. Pennyroyal and tansy aren't just poisons, Miss Sterling. They are abortifacients. Someone was trying to terminate a pregnancy. I felt the blood drain from my face, thinking of my own secret. But Detective Chun pulled me aside, her eyes burning with a mixture of fury and tears, and said 5 words that made my blood freeze. My mother was 4 months pregnant. I stared at Detective Chun in shock. Mrs. Chun was 58. Pregnant. I whispered. IVF. It was a miracle for her and her new husband, Sarah said, her voice cracking. And now that miracle is gone. The hemorrhage was too severe. A silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of the lost life. Detective, I said, my voice shaking. I'm pregnant too. 3 months. That smoothie. Eric gave it to me for our anniversary. He insisted I drink it. Sarah's eyes widened, shifting from suspicion to realization. The target wasn't my mother. It was you. But he doesn't know, I cried. I haven't told him yet. Are you sure? Sarah asked. She pulled out her phone. We pulled the security footage from your office building immediately after the 911 call. Eric claimed he came straight from the organic market. She tapped the screen. The footage showed the underground parking garage. Eric's silver sedan was parked in a dark corner. The timestamp showed he had been sitting there for 45 minutes before coming up to my office. That's when Detective Chun swiped to the next photo. It was a zoomed-in, grainy shot of the passenger seat. Eric wasn't alone. There was a woman's silhouette beside him, leaning close, her hand resting intimately on his arm. He hadn't been shopping. He had been plotting. I squinted at the screen, but the shadows obscured the woman's face. I can't tell who it is, I said. I can, Sarah said grimly. We ran facial recognition on the partial profile as she exited the car later. It's Amber Liu. My knees gave way and I sank into the plastic chair. Amber, my junior architect. I had hired her 8 months ago. She was brilliant, eager, always staying late to help me with the overflow. I had mentored her. I had treated her like a little sister. That's impossible, I murmured. Amber worships me. She's barely out of grad school. She's living in a penthouse in the financial district, Sarah countered. Rent is $6,000 a month, far beyond a junior associate's salary. The lease is held by a shell company. My phone buzzed. It was James, my executive assistant. I put him on speaker. Maya, the police are here taking samples, but I looked at the internal logs like you asked. Amber has been accessing the secure archives. What was she looking at? Not the museum blueprints, James said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Maya, she requested the physical keys to the dead files, your father's archives. Specifically, the Wellington Estate Trust documents. My father's legacy. The Wellington Estate was the crown jewel of my inheritance, locked in a trust. James, I said, why would she need those? James cleared his throat nervously. Because Maya. The trust documents have a clause about heirs. And 5 minutes ago, I found a draft email on Amber's work computer addressed to a lawyer. The Wellington Estate. My father, the legendary architect David Sterling, had left it to me with a bizarre, archaic stipulation. To fully inherit the development rights, worth hundreds of millions, I had to produce a biological heir within 5 years of his death, or the rights would transfer to a charitable trust managed by the board. I had 3 years left. It was a clause born of his obsession with legacy. If my baby was born, the estate was mine secure. If I miscarried, or if I never had a child. Sarah drove me to Eric's house, my house technically, though he treated it as his domain. With a warrant in hand, we entered his home office. It was immaculate, but Sarah went straight to the trash bin, bypassing the shredder. Amateurs always forget the cloud, she muttered, logging into his desktop. He had left his email open. There, in the sent folder, were my medical records, forwarded from my personal account, which he must have hacked, to an anonymous encrypted email. He knew. He had known about the baby for weeks. He knew I was pregnant, I said, tears finally spilling over. He wanted to kill our child so I wouldn't secure the inheritance? Look deeper, Sarah said, pulling a physical file from the bottom drawer of his desk. It was dusty, hidden beneath tax returns. I opened the folder. Inside were divorce papers. My hand shook as I read the names. Eric Miller and Amber Wong Hartwell. They were dated 7 years ago. Amber wasn't just my employee. She was his ex-wife, and she had changed her name to infiltrate my life. The room spun. Eric and Amber. They had been playing a long game. Amber Wong Hartwell, had altered her appearance, dyed her hair, and played the role of the innocent graduate to get close to me. They want the money, Sarah said, piecing it together. If you lose the baby, you lose the Wellington rights. But who gets them? The charitable trust, I said. But the board appoints the trust manager. Sarah was typing furiously. The shell company paying for Amber's penthouse? It's funded by offshore accounts connected to Eric's consulting firm. But look at the incoming transfers. They aren't from clients. They're loans. They are drowning in debt, Maya. They've been leveraging your future to live like royalty. It made sickening sense. Eric's consulting was a sham. He had been living off my salary and taking out loans against my future inheritance, betting on a payout that required my failure. My phone buzzed again. A text from a blocked number. I opened the message. Stop digging, Maya. Mrs. Chun was an accident, but the next one won't be. Some secrets about your father should stay buried. Attached was a photo taken just seconds ago, of me standing in the window of Eric's study, looking out. I ducked away from the window, heart hammering against my ribs. They're watching us. Sarah drew her service weapon, checking the street. Let them watch. I have enough for probable cause on Eric, but we need to tie Amber to the poison directly. James called again. Maya. I tracked Eric's phone location history from yesterday. He spent 2 hours at a holistic clinic in Chinatown. Dr. Helena Marsh. Does that ring a bell? It didn't. But Sarah knew the name. Marsh. She's known for off-the-books remedies. Let's go. The clinic was a dim, herbal-scented storefront. Dr. Marsh, a nervous woman in her 60s, tried to block us at the counter. We are closed. Sarah didn't blink. She slapped a photo of her mother onto the glass counter. Intubated, pale, fighting for her life. My mother is dying because someone bought lethal doses of pennyroyal from you. You can talk to us now, or you can talk to a judge when I charge you as an accessory to attempted murder. Dr. Marsh crumbled. Her hands trembled as she reached for a ledger beneath the counter. She opened the book. They came in together, she whispered. The man and the young woman. She did all the talking. She said it was for a family member. Dr. Marsh pointed to a signature at the bottom of the receipt. It wasn't Eric's. It was Amber's. We had the receipt. We had the connection. Amber had purchased the specific blend of herbs found in Mrs. Chen's system. Dr. Marsh's testimony confirmed premeditation. They hadn't just bought herbs. They had asked for a specific concentration guaranteed to induce miscarriage. Secure this, Sarah told the uniformed officer she called in. I'm bringing Amber in. As we stepped out of the clinic into the drizzling rain, a black sedan idled across the street. The window rolled down. It was Eric. And in the passenger seat, looking straight at me, was Amber. She didn't look scared. She looked triumphant. She wore a tight white dress that accentuated a distinct, rounded bump at her midsection. She smiled, a cruel, knowing smirk, and deliberately placed her hand protectively over her belly. The message was clear, silent, and devastating. She was having his child. While he tried to poison mine, he had impregnated his ex-wife. They were building a new family on the grave of mine. Eric was arrested an hour later at his gym. Amber was brought in from the penthouse. I watched from behind the one-way glass as Sarah interrogated Eric. He was arrogant at first, denying everything, claiming the smoothie was innocent. Then Sarah laid the photos on the table, the receipt signed by Amber, the text messages recovered from his cloud, the divorce papers. "We know about the inheritance, Eric," Sarah said calmly. "We know you needed Maya to lose the baby so the trust would default. But here's what I don't get. If the trust defaults to charity, how do you get paid?" Eric cracked. The arrogance dissolved into panic. "It wasn't supposed to go to charity," Amber said. Amber said she found a loophole. She said if I married her after Maya was out of the picture, she could claim the estate. "Claim it how?" "She's pregnant," Eric blurted out. "She's carrying my son. She said the trust allows for a male heir to contest the will if the direct line fails." Sarah looked at the file in her hands and then at Eric with pity. "Eric, we had the jail medic examine Amber upon intake." Eric looked up confused. Sarah leaned forward. "There is no baby, Eric. Amber isn't pregnant. She's been wearing a silicone prosthetic. You were destroying your real child for a ghost." Eric's scream of denial was muffled by the glass, but I felt it. He had been played. We both had. If Amber wasn't pregnant, the plan to use an heir to claim the estate was a lie. So what was her endgame? Sarah left Eric sobbing and went to Amber's holding room. Amber sat perfectly still, not a hair out of place, seemingly unbothered by the handcuffs. Sarah didn't ask questions. She simply placed a birth certificate on the table. Amber Wong Hartwell. Mother Margaret Wong. Amber's eyes flickered. Margaret Wong. The name sounded vaguely familiar from my childhood. "Your mother was David Sterling's business partner 30 years ago," Sarah said. "Before he became famous. Before Sterling and Associates. She was the genius." Amber spat, her mask finally slipping. "He was just the face. He forced her out. Bought her shares for pennies before the firm went public. She died in a state-run nursing home while you grew up in a mansion. It wasn't just greed. It was vengeance. Pure, distilled generational hate." Sarah pulled a document from the evidence bag seized at the penthouse. "Is this why you did it?" she asked. It was a will. A forgery, perfectly aged. It claimed my father had left 50% of the firm to Margaret Wong's descendants. Amber didn't need a baby. She needed me to be heirless so the estate would be vulnerable to a legal challenge. The scope of Amber's surveillance was terrifying. In her apartment, police found cameras that had been hidden in my office smoke detector and my living room bookshelf. She had watched me for a year. She knew my cycle. She knew I was pregnant before I even took the test. As officers led her away to transfer her to county jail, I stood in the hallway. I had to see her. Amber stopped when she saw me. She didn't look remorseful. She looked like she had won, even in chains. "You think this is over?" she whispered, leaning in as the officer tugged her arm. "You think your father was a saint? Check the Wellington estate files, Maya. The real ones. The ones he hid in the safe in the floorboards. He didn't just buy my mother out. He framed her." I wanted to dismiss her as a psychopath, but the conviction in her eyes chilled me. She smiled one last time. "I might be going to prison, Maya, but you're going to live in a house built on rot. Enjoy the legacy." I tore apart my father's old office that night. Under the floorboards, just as Amber said, was a metal box. Inside were the journals of David Sterling. I read them until dawn. The truth was ugly. My father hadn't just been ruthless. He had been criminal. He had bribed city officials to rezone the Wellington district, displacing hundreds of low-income families. When Margaret Wong threatened to expose him, he planted evidence of embezzlement to force her resignation. Amber was a monster created by my father's sins. It didn't excuse her attempt on my life or Mrs. Chen's, but it shattered the pedestal I had placed my father on. Mrs. Chun survived. Her recovery was slow. and the loss of her baby was a grief that would never fully heal. I sat by her bedside every day. We were bonded by a trauma that no one else could understand. Eric pleaded guilty to attempted murder to avoid a life sentence. He got 15 years. I didn't go to the sentencing. 6 months later, I stood in the maternity ward, holding my newborn daughter. Detective Chun stood beside me, looking down at the baby. "What will you tell her?" she asked. "About her father? About her grandfather?" I looked at my daughter's innocent face and knew exactly what I had to do. The ribbon cutting for the Wong Sterling Community Center was attended by the mayor and the press. I stood at the podium, Mrs. Chun in the front row, looking stronger. I had dissolved the Wellington Trust. Instead of a luxury high-rise, the land was developed into affordable housing and a community arts center. I couldn't undo what my father did, but I could use his money to fix it. Amber was sentenced to 20 years. I visited her once. I slid a brochure across the glass partition. "It's a scholarship," I told her. "The Margaret Wong Grant for Underprivileged Architects. Full ride. Living expenses included." Amber stared at it, silent, stretching for a long time. She didn't say thank you. She didn't apologize. But for the first time, the hate in her eyes dimmed, replaced by something like exhaustion. I walked out of the prison and into the sunlight. My daughter, Hope, was waiting in the car with her nanny. I got into the driver's seat and looked in the rearview mirror. No more shadows. No more ghosts. I drove back to the firm. I had blueprints to review. Not for a monument to a dead man's ego, but for a shelter for the living. The betrayal had been silent, but my response would be loud, enduring, and built to last.